Welcome to Hope Shot Recovery. I'm Sonia. I'm so glad that you can join me today. I have got a good one for you today. I've got my friend Boston Bornagain. He's an author, he's in recovery, and he is here to share his story today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you for having me. How's everything going?
Going great. I'm so excited to do this with you. So, my friend Jamie and I have been in a lot of discussions about drugs and demonic activity, which is how I got introduced to Boston. And so, he's going to tell you his experiences with that. But before we do that, he is an author and he has wrote a book called Fire and Ice, the Meth Bible. Tell me a little about your book.
Fire and Ice, the Meth Bible is an account of my whole addiction, starting from the time I was 13 years old when I touched my first joint. And then it went into alcohol, and it was the progression of my addiction. And then when it gets into methamphetamines, the book gets a little crazy, no pun intended. You know, I was a nighttime cab driver in South Texas, and passengers buckle up because it was a bumpy ride. But I think you'll love it.
I bet you've seen a lot of stuff being a nighttime cab driver.
Right. I don't think that was part of my journey by mistake. That's for sure.
Yes. So,
Right.
okay, so let's just go to your story. Let's start from the beginning. Where did your addiction first start?
Well, I grew up in a little town outside of Boston, Massachusetts called Reading, Massachusetts. A friend of mine, we stole a half a joint, and it started underneath a cold bridge covered with ice in Reading, Massachusetts when I was 13 years old. And it all started right there. It was, in marijuana, I've never heard of it killing anybody personally, but it was the answer to all my problems because it was the first time I found that getting outside of my reality was the answer to all of my issues. It was a lie. The devil grabbed me really early in life, just like he does to most of us. He's a coward who attacks children and childhood trauma. All of it melted away. And then I found alcohol in the summer of going in from 8th to 9th grade, right around the 14-year-old mark. And I remember my first drink. I remember being in the woods with my buddy, and I took the first sip of vodka, and I remember thinking this at the first sip. I said, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I want to feel like for the rest of my life. And I drank every single day after that. I was a full-blown vodka drinker at 14 years old. I'm drinking a half of a half gallon every single day. Every 2 days I'd be getting another bottle. And I started doing hard drugs right after that. I mean, I went right from the alcohol, and I was mixing it with heroin, cocaine, tons of those ADHD speed pills. I was doing all those in 9th grade. I was full on in addiction by the time it was before I was old enough to drive. That's where it started.
So interesting. Same. Like I started using when I was young. And for me, the first time I did cocaine was like that. I remember it so vividly. And it was just like, this is what I want to do more all the time.
Yeah.
So tell me, when did you first get introduced to methamphetamine? Because I know things must have changed a lot when you got introduced to meth.
Well, I talk about it in the book. I go through the various stages of my life. The first time I tried crystal meth was when I was 19 and I was out in Vegas. I went out there to be a stand-up comic. I was just about to go into the military. I went out and took the ASVAB. I was training everything. I was in the best shape of my life. And then I, at the last minute, decided to go to Vegas to be a stand-up comic, right? So I get out there, 9/11 happens like 2 weeks after. I think God redirected my life because a lot of the people didn't come home from that event, from those 2 wars, right? So I just went into a different type of hell. I was in Vegas and I smoked that glass from way back. That was like the real strong stuff. And I messed with it. I was, and I was messing with crack and stuff out there. I never took the stage once. That was my first experience with crystal meth. And then I revisited it later on in life. I was an old man doing this stuff, but that was the first time I did it. Was out in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Okay, I have a question for you. So one thing that I think that we connect with, and what I love about your book is like you talk about the dark side and how you live in the light today, right? So
Right.
did you know the Lord when you were going through all of this stuff before? Like you said that God diverted you from that. Did you know that back then? Did you have a relationship with him?
Well, I grew up a Catholic in Boston, right? I was an Irish Catholic in Boston. I never really believed, and then one of the first big things that happened in my addiction was I was in my 20s. I was a businessman. I was a full-blown alcoholic, really big. I got on antidepressants and I had a major suicide attempt. It's in the book too. I took like 91 milligrams Xanax. It was a full-on trying to kill myself event. I had it. I had definitely chemical things going on in my brain. Those pills made it actually worse. I'm allergic to those type of drugs. But I was in a coma for 5 days on that. And I remember they gave me the last rites. And I didn't even know it. I was in church a week later. I'd just gotten out of the hospital and I was staring at the cross. I wasn't even a believer. I went to the church. I gravitated towards Christ. I was staring at this big statue of Christ up on a cross at this church in Corpus Christi. And this missionary priest from Africa walked by and he said, "My son, how are you even here?" And he looked like he saw a ghost. And he told me, he gave me the last rites. And then it started to click a little bit. Like I knew God's hand was on my life. And I would now and then start to run to him when I was in trouble. It was a progressive thing, you know. But that was the first major event where I started to really believe that there was something greater than myself that was saving my life from these situations.
Yeah, definitely. There's a purpose for your life. I mean, if you live through taking 91 Xanaxes, that in itself is miraculous.
Right.
So tell me about the darker days. When did meth start to get dark for you?
So I was a businessman, and I had gotten beaten in a couple bad business deals. Divorce happened, kids are gone, career's gone. I didn't know who I was anymore, my whole identity, because I didn't have my identity in Christ at that time. Now the world can crumble around me and I'd be okay. Even though he slayed me, I trust him, but back then it wasn't like that. I ended up living at my dad's house and by chance, I always say by chance, and it's God in my journey. But by chance, I ended up as a nighttime cab driver in Corpus Christi, Texas, the body of Christ, by no mistake as well. You know, the clientele was pimps, prostitutes, drug dealers, identity thieves, check cashers, money printers. I mean, anybody who you'd find in an ominous taxi cab after, 10 o'clock at night. And that became a new avenue for me to support this habit that I've acquired. Now I'm into crystal meth full on into the game, into the whole lifestyle, and we've done videos about the game. It really is the devil's carnival. It's where we all gravitate towards each other in brokenness. And that's where I started seeing glimmers of real evil, the evil one. Like you're seeing sexual brokenness, you're seeing thieving, lying, stealing, manipulation, division, all the hallmarks of the devil. And it just spiraled into the craziest, darkest period of my entire life. And money comes quickly and easily. I was charging drugs for rides. I then started driving my personal car in the morning all day. I'm finding myself behind the wheel of a car, slaving away 24 hours a day, some days sometimes 5 days in a row, not drinking water, not eating, nothing. And it was just a life of crime. It was a life of agony, and it was a complete life of evil. And that's where I started seeing supernatural events.
Mhm. Yeah. And the thing is with meth addiction, I mean, I also was addicted to all other substances. There's not a substance that I didn't put in my body that I became addicted to. But meth addiction is, in my opinion, much different than any other addiction because at some point in time, you cross over this line and you know that the veil has been lifted and you're living around evil. You could just feel the evil presence around you, the shadows, the voices. I mean, you know that this is hell on earth. Did you experience that as well?
Yes, and it's far deeper. The biggest thing we'll hear in the comments of these videos is, you weren't sleeping, or it was just paranoia. No, it's far deeper than that, okay? I mean, the meth game is run by the supernatural, okay? It really is. You're surrounded by card readers, witches, warlocks. It's not just gang members and everything. It all ties into that. But there is I mean, in the book, there's this one part. I was living at a place called Crack Mansion, okay? A big mansion off Ocean Drive in Corpus. And the house had to be worth $500,000 to $1 million. And there I'm hearing stories about how they're cooking dope and they're blessing it in a proverbial black mass before they send the drugs all over the city. There's a purpose for that. In these trap houses, you know, it was a Mexican community predominantly, okay? 6-foot tall statues of La Muerta, you know, Santa Muerta, you know, and things like that. Black magic, all of this stuff is around. Why do these people gravitate towards the meth game? It's because, like you said, it is a portal to hell. That is the lubricant that the devil uses to open the spiritual floodgates of evil in your life. Now, I believe that we get so close to the enemy while we're on that drug in particular, that Christ presents himself to us. Because I've had a lot of supernatural experiences with Christ on that drug as well. That's something that most people will never talk about openly, but I did have them, and that's ultimately what led to my recovery, you know. And I believe he gives us a choice. We stand at a crossroads. I remember standing in my dad's kitchen and thinking, I can either go with God or the devil, but whichever one I'm going to choose, I'm going to go all the way. And I ended up picking God. Thank God.
Wow, that is so cool. And I relate to that so much. So when I was in the last 2 years of my addiction, I was dating a drug dealer, but that was just a front, the drug dealer, right? He was actually a sorcerer, and he practiced in black magic, and his drug dealing was just a way to get to people so that he could, like, you know, do spells and shit on them. It was really truly scary. But also, I love what you just said about how it also, we have encounters with the Lord during that time, because I had a spiritual experience. I'd been up for 3 days on methamphetamine, and anybody can never tell me that God won't meet you right where you're at, because I had been up for 3 days. I called out to the Lord, and he touched me that night, and it changed my whole perspective on life. When you think of things in an eternal sense, it changes everything about the present moment. And that is not what happened immediately, but it is what led to my recovery and me really seeking God and surrendering him when I finally got clean. So I just relate to that so much. So
Right.
what happened? I mean, when did things start to change?
Well, it got really, really bad. You know, I found that my car got repoed. I had no way to get drugs. I was going into what's called deep methamphetamine psychosis. But here's the thing. I got into a major car accident before the psychosis. Okay. Major. I hit a sign going like 70 miles an hour in a taxi cab. I fell asleep. The sign dropped on my head. And for days after the accident, I mean, it's a miraculous story that's in the book too. They actually ended up giving me my dope back, and I pulled the IVs out of my arm and left the hospital. And all 5 ribs were sawed in half. I crushed my left heel underneath the seat. The engine was in the front seat. Car was on fire, and I got up and walked away. But for days after that, I had these like signs flashing in my head. One of the things that it said was, find the others. And the other one was the big event. Now, find the others, I think, has meaning to me now. But that was like, am I going crazy? I really believed I was going crazy, but it was before the psychosis. Then I start drifting into psychosis after that spiritual experience, okay? And I got in so deep. I believed fully in my heart. You could not tell me that I was not in a hidden camera movie. I thought I was being filmed by satellites. I thought Jim Carrey was an executive producer on this movie. I thought, Jim, I'm still waiting on my check if you're listening. I thought that everybody was in on it. People wearing makeup. Everyone was an actor. My own father was dying of cancer, was in on it. I believed everybody was paid off. It was so real that you could not tell me. I started going in and out of psych wards. The police were arresting me. You know, I'm telling everybody who will listen about this movie. And eventually my dad died. And I found out I'm taking care of him while he has spinal cancer during this movie event. I mean, there was horrors in the house. It's all in the book as well. I get to a breaking point, and the house was boarded up by the police. This is a house in the country club estates, okay? And the cops board the house up. I'm in there with a needle in my arm while they're boarding the house up. A month after that, I was in a parking lot of somebody just put a knife to my throat. It was insane. I'm in a parking lot of a grocery store, I get a phone call, and somebody told me my dad was really, in fact, dead, and something clicked. 4 hours later, I did a self-inflicted arrest, okay? I've been refused treatment twice in the last month. People trying to take me to treatment. They didn't have a bed for me, state funded. I had no choice, I felt. I was passed out on the bed, and I got up, and I picked up a big butcher knife, and I walked over to a fast food restaurant. It's on YouTube. My arrest is on 3 different channels. And I didn't want to hurt anybody or take anything, but I walked in and I said, this is not a robbery. I said, everybody get up out of here. And they left. And I took a burger and I poured me a Coke and I threw the knife down first. And I sat and waited for the police. And, you know, they almost shot me. It's a miraculous story. They came in, they thought it was an active shooter situation. But I faced some serious criminal charges on that. I faced an aggravated armed robbery in the state of Texas, 3 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. So you stack the years up. It's 159 years stacked. I'm in deep methamphetamine psychosis, but for people like us, drugs disqualify you from an insanity finding, okay? If you're on drugs, it's like drunk driving. You have no excuse. So after 8 months of being incarcerated with no drugs in my system, I went to bed talking to the weatherman on TV and thinking we were having a conversation. And I woke up and I was completely healed, just like I am right now. That was an absolute unexplainable miracle from God. Even the medical experts couldn't. They said I was so far into psychosis. After 90 days, most people don't come out. So I ended up, the experts labeled my trial a miracle court case. The lawyer went to the DA's office the night before trial, and by chance, the DA caseload switched. They'd already rejected my insanity defense, but this new DA said, yeah, we'll push it through. And I got off on those criminal charges by NGRI insanity finding. And I had to live in a mental institution for the criminally insane as part of a safety evaluation for 8.5 months after my 10 months in jail.
Wow, that is incredible. I mean, since we've just been talking for the last 15 minutes, you have told me like 5 different things that have happened to you that have been sheerly like a miracle. And in Texas, no less. Like Texas comes for you. I cannot believe that happened. I mean, that's truly God. So what happened when you got to the mental place or the psychological, whatever it's called?
So now I'm healed. And I'm in a mental institution for the criminally insane, okay? And I'm completely healed like I am now. So people like normal people don't end up there. This was a total mistake that I ended up. And I go to Vernon Supermax. Like Andrea Yates was at there at one time. She drowned her 5 children in Houston. I was there with true blue serial killers as roommates. I'm sleeping in a room with a serial killer who's killed 11 prostitutes. I mean, my addiction landed me in this place. Now, when I was 13, do you think I thought that first half joint was going to land me in a mental institution surrounded by killers and the murder of children and women? I mean, those were my peers at this time. It was one of the most horrifying experiences of my entire life. And I got stepped down into San Antonio State Hospital, okay? This is all in the book. It's detailed in a chapter called Dark Days Asylum Nights. And I was in there and something clicked and I had these opportunities. And I don't want to give too much away, but let's put it this way. I ended up freeing myself with a piece of scrap paper and a pen. I wrote a 4-page letter in 5 minutes. The Holy Spirit went through me and it ultimately set me free. And I wrote this book because I saw that the power of the spoken word, the power of the written word, if it could set me free from a 99-year psych hold in a mental institution, Could it take me around the world? Could it change a lot of people's lives? And then I had a cell phone inside, and I started writing short stories. I found a way to legally get the cell phone inside if they took the cameras up. My mom sent it to me. And there's actually a YouTube video. I wrote 12 letters in all. I became a champion for the people in that place. I risked it all. They could have held me the rest of my natural life. I saw tons of sexual abuse, tons of violence, tons of neglect, people in their own urine for months at a time. And I started to want to change things in there. And I started writing these letters, okay? And I caused a lot of problems. The last event was right before I left. And it's on YouTube. If you YouTube San Antonio State Hospital escape, that video was me breaking that story from inside that hospital. That was my roommate. He threatened to kill his wife and child, and they covered it up. He was on the streets of San Antonio running around. They told the police, but not the local media. He walked over the fence. He got these two mentally challenged people to form a human ladder, and he just hopped the wall and walked away. Wow. So I was in there and I messaged all the news channels, and finally one person got back to me, and they're like, I said, do you want a story about an escaped mental patient? They're like, you can't have a phone in there. They didn't believe I was there. Holy Spirit again. I dropped a GPS pin from inside the unit. They immediately asked me his name. They verified the story broke, and then they ran a story on Saturday morning, I believe it was. And that second story detailed all the undocumented escapes, all the violence. And down on Monday morning, I was wiping down the walls for $7 a day. And my social worker came up and said, Mr. Durkin, I have a stack of files, and I am going to get you out of this hospital right away. And I came out a completely free man with no criminal record. And I believe God spared me from that branding, and he spared me of all of it so that I could come out here and tell this miracle-filled story, and I could help set the captives free by telling the truth about the meth game and the plague that methamphetamines have been.
That is incredible. I mean, that is incredible. So you get out of the asylum, okay, which is just, I mean, that's just so crazy. I love that story, that because you didn't know you would ever get out, right? You were sentenced there for your natural life.
Well, I had to prove my sanity. I beat the case, but then I had to prove that I was safe to go back into society. For example, if I raised my voice in anger in any way, oh, that's another 6 months. If someone was beating me to death, I couldn't raise my hand to defend myself. It was a very scary situation. I am around people so dangerous that they have ankle monitors on. The prison said they were too crazy for prison. Okay.
Wow.
So I was basically, I was in there and I was powerless, but I had God with me. And after the trial, I was an absolute 100% believer. So when I was in the movie, when I was crazy, the story of Nebuchadnezzar, I later found this in the Bible, okay, in the book of Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar is a prideful king, just like I thought I was, king baby, running my own world. God leveled me. He drove me insane. And what he did during the insanity touched me. It opened my eyes to the fact that there's something greater than me. So many miracle, real encounters with Jesus Christ in particular, okay? And I was a full-on believer. When I snapped out, none of that faded. Then I had the miracle court case, and I said, God's hand's on my life. Then I get out of the institution, God's hand's definitely on my life. Then I look in the rear view and I said, how many times did he save me? He's been there the whole time. I live a miracle life. I live my life as a story today. Okay. There's nothing like that. I got out. I've been robbed for probably $75,000 in inheritance while I was locked up. I had 11 grand. Somebody stole that right before I got out. So I hit the streets homeless in Corpus Christi. And I wrote that book, Homeless, from January 1st to July 1st, 2020. I have a 10th grade education. Where did the words come from? Then the editor came. So the editor, Sandra Lee, I just want to tell you this story because I wouldn't believe it if I didn't have it in writing. I start working. So many people are offering to edit this book for free. Okay. I'm releasing the short stories online. So it's getting a little bit of a buzz. And so I picked this lady who's from Corpus. And then later, after we start working on the book, I'm sending her chapters, right? Chapter by chapter. And I look at her profile. She works at this particular place. My dad was an accountant. I said, my dad worked there. She said, what department? I said, accounting. she said, what's his name? And I told her, and she couldn't believe it. She couldn't even speak. She was the lady who took my dad's job at that place in that department while he had cancer. She's editing a book about a person that she took the job of. There's no mistakes. There's coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous.
Yes.
I knew I
Yes.
was on the right path right then and there. And that's why I wrote the whole book, and then I shelved it for 2 years. You know, God needed to work on me first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yes.
that is so cool. I love that. And so, like you said, I mean, that was not just some random thing. I mean, everything happens for a reason. And I just love how you said, like, when you look back on all of these things, you know that God was with you the whole time. So when you got out, you said you started writing a book right away, right? When you got out of the asylum, you were homeless?
Yes, I got out. I was looking at Facebook memories from yesterday and the day before. I got out on December 16th, 2019. Now, this is where the miracles really started. I took $300. I bought a cheap tablet. I shouldn't have done that by logical thinking. I was homeless. I should have saved every penny. I knew that I had a story. I had the ability to write it, and I knew God would bless my life. So I stepped out on faith, and I wrote that book while I was homeless. The first night, I'm in a trap house motel that I used to use in, stayed clean. And I wrote in the book, one of the best lines for me in the book was, I was walking down the street in that bad neighborhood, Flower Bluff in Corpus Christi, Texas. And I said, the streets were different because I was not the same. I could now go anywhere. I was free. The chains got rattled off, and now I'm beating demons with them. Okay. So then I start writing the book, and I get done with that. And I actually came to Washington. I met a girl online, and I knew she was going to be my wife from the first time I looked at her, and I wrote an email. I got her to agree to go on a date with me. I step out on faith. I live my life as a story now, right? I know God's going to come through. If he tells me something and I step out, it happens every single time. And that's why, like, I read Hebrews 11, okay? I read Hebrews 11. And I came here, and I wrote this email. Everything that I told her our life would look like came true. And a year and 2 days after I got here, the last line said, I'm going to ask you to be my wife. I married that girl. Our life's amazing. So this all started with going crazy, right? It all started with Christ presenting himself to me, and then me making a decision to follow his voice wherever I go. It changed my entire world. I am making more money than I ever have in my entire life. And I've leased millions and millions, $20 million worth of vacation rentals in my career and stuff like that. I'm doing better now than ever. I put out a 718-page book. I'm driving a brand new car. We have 2 apartments today because of circumstances. I'm stepping out on all this crazy faith. My life keeps getting better and better because God says, I have more for you. I'll always have more for you if you want to have more faith for me. So that's what the second book is going to be about. It's called Deep Washington. It's being written right now. The miracles just don't stop, Sonia. It's crazy. I'm sure you can relate to this kind of stuff. Like your life. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. I mean, if you would have told me 4 years ago that I'd be doing what I was doing now, I would have told you to go smoke another rock. I mean, really, like, it's just changed so much. And what I've heard from your story, like what I heard you say is that your walk with God, like, it's not going to be easy, you know, and sometimes God brings us through like the worst of things to bring us to where we're supposed to be in life. And I love what you said about walking by faith, because that's something that I really try to do in my life, is walk by faith. And I think that's the reason that he's opened so many doors for me. I mean, I know I want to be there for my family, but other than that, like, I don't have much plans for the future. I'm just going to let God write my story, you know, and that's
Right.
what you've done. And I mean, you just have such an incredible story. And I'm so glad that you came on today. So, okay, if there's somebody out there right now that's watching this video, and let's say they've been up smoking meth a little too long or whatever they're doing, you know, maybe they're in a psychosis like we were, what would you say to them, maybe to give them a little hope to get through that?
One of the first seeds planted in me finding the Lord was when I was higher than a kite in psychosis, and I found Derek Prince's Demon Gangs. Now, you and I love Derek Prince.
Yes.
He is the master of deliverance outside of Jesus Christ, if you ask me. and he was a gift from God to this world. Those videos changed my life, okay? There is true power in the Lord Jesus Christ, not only to deliver you from the demons, the gang stalking, the evil lifestyle, the game, but once you make the decision to follow the Lord Jesus Christ, there will be true power in your life. It's listening to his voice. You said about your family, I had this highlighted. It was by faith that Noah built a large boat to save his family from the flood. He obeyed God, who warned him about things that had never happened before. By his faith, Noah condemned the rest of the world and received righteousness that came with faith. Sometimes to save our family and to get us all to the next level, we have to do crazy things. If God says it, we move. And that's what'll change your life, is relying on the Lord. And eventually you don't struggle with the meth and the addiction so much anymore. You start running towards your purpose in life, and it's the most amazing feeling you can ever have.
So true. And then you know that everything that you've been through happened for a reason so that you could do what you're supposed to do in your life. And it is just the most amazing thing. So I'm so glad you came today. Thank you so much. You have such an incredible story. So you guys have got to go get the book. I believe it's available on Amazon, right?
Amazon.com, barnesandnoble.com online. And it's being read in Australia, Canada, Mexico, coast to coast, United States. I'm trying to get it over in the UK as well. So, it's just blowing my mind. Go check the book out. It's 718 pages of fire, baby. Let me tell you.
Yes, Fire and Ice, the Meth Bible. Y'all have got to go check it out. Also, if you want to follow Boston Bornagain's journey, I'm going to drop his social links below in the description so that you can hear more from him. So thank you guys so much for watching Hope Shot Recovery, and we will see you back again soon.